Hey guys, hey ladies, hey friends, hey foes. We just wanted to take a second to remind you that while we're okay swearing when little ears are listening, you might not be, and that's okay. So here's your chance to pause us and wait for nap time, or pop in your earbuds. We hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Done Playing by the Rules. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Janelle, still in glasses. Sorry, everyone.
We just let our kids do a little Zoom call. My son was like begging to talk to Janelle.
It was so fun.
And it was the cutest thing. They miss
I
you
want to
guys.
do it every week. Would you guys listen to a podcast that was just our kids talking to each other? Because it was literally like the highlight of my day.
And then there's 4 of them, so they just like talk over each other. And it's
my turn.
So cute.
My turn.
They're so cute, though. They miss each other.
Oh, they miss each other so much, and I miss you so much. I actually had a mini spiral, which is what the topic of this episode is yesterday, where I was like, Josh, I want to move away from here. Like, I am over it. It was, I think, wind chill -3 yesterday. The kids had been in the house all weekend because we had a ice rainstorm, and we literally couldn't walk up the driveway. We had to walk through the snow, and even some of the spots on the snow were so slippery that the kids would fall. I was like, we've been in the house all weekend. Like, we're going to Target today because you guys literally have been locked in all weekend, and we only go when everybody else is like in school because they want to spend an hour in each toy aisle, and that's like their big excitement. And then they buy one $3 like mystery egg or whatever.
Yep.
And so then both cars parked right next to me, and I was in my husband's truck because I needed 4-wheel drive because it was so icy. And I couldn't get the groceries in the truck, and it was -3, and I was like not dressed appropriately, and I got the kids in the. I came home and I was like on the verge of tears, and I was like, Josh, I can't do this anymore. And he's like, if you want to go back to Virginia, you can go back to Virginia. And I was like, I can't just split up our family. I was like, I'll go anywhere. It just needs to be warmer than this. And he just like listened through it, but like, we miss you guys so much. So I totally get it. I want to talk to Ezra all day.
I know. We've been trying to build like a little path behind our house to get to.
So there's like our path.
I know. There's like a new street behind our house.
Yeah.
And to get to it, you have to go around. Everyone out here owns some kind of acreage. So you can kind of imagine how big the lots are. And it looks close, but it's not when you go all the way around. And I don't want my kids like riding their bikes on the main street. And so we've been trying to build a path.
Yeah, and there's like a weird curve on that street too that makes me nervous.
Yeah. And so we've been trying to build a path like through the woods, literally like over a creek and through the woods. And every time it pops out right where your house was going to be. And I'm like, whoa, that's so close and so perfect. Like,
it's so every time it's just leading you. So Jenna, if you haven't listened to previous episodes, we literally had bought the lot behind Jenna over the river and through the woods. And then Josh had to transfer to Chicago. So now we live in Chicago, and we were supposed to live behind Jenna.
And they haven't sold the house. They're not selling it.
I told Josh that. He's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I was like, that lot 5 is still available. And he was like, okay, calm down. Like,
and it's so nice. They changed it into a 6-bedroom house.
Oh my God.
So come back to us so we don't spiral.
So we do less mini spirals, deal.
So mini spirals are what kind of Janelle and I coin our emotionally, mentally down times, like when we're spiraling, basically.
So it's based on, I think did my sister send me the meme and I sent it to you? But it's like, it's a package of like instant pasta that's called mini spirals. And it says, when you don't have time for a full spiral, and then it's mini spirals, the package. And so Jenna and I started saying, like, is it a full spiral or a mini spiral? Yeah. And so we thought it was a good episode topic because I realized that my mini spiral recently was turning into a real spiral. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But we wanted to talk a little bit about our mini spirals and talk with you guys about mini spirals, and then talk about mega spirals.
Yeah.
And how to know the difference and when to call your doctor.
Yeah. When we say mini spirals, it's not just a day. A lot of times it's a couple days.
3 days. Just where 3 days,
Yeah. And like, I feel like now that we're a lot more in tune with what's going on with our bodies, we can recognize and acknowledge and give it the space it
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like okay to say it, I feel like. And sometimes I still do have a hard time telling because my mini spirals aren't me sitting on the couch crying. They're
No.
more me feeling like I have to do a million things that aren't relevant. And I'm
Hmm.
usually moody and snappy. And if you're a mom or just a person with a busy life, with a family, especially, or working, you know that sometimes you just feel that way because there is a lot to do.
There
But a
is.
lot of times it's actually not about the to do list, it's about
No.
the emotion tied to whatever else is going on. And then I just feel like the house has to be clean, the laundry has to be done. Oh, all of a sudden my kids are behind in school and I need to like catch them up. Like, luckily my kids are along for the ride, but
Yeah,
yeah.
they're used to us. Okay, so when was your let's talk about what a mini spiral, like when was your last one that you remember?
I had one after Christmas and it was definitely like because my brother left.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, so if you've listened, you know, if you haven't, you don't. So I'll tell you, my parents are both deceased and I have a brother. He came to visit for the first time in 2 years. And this whole time I was like, oh, these 2 years have gone by fast. It's fine. Everything's fine. And when he came, when I say it was perfect, minus him hurting his shoulder on a skateboard, it was perfect. Like
Yeah.
my brother, my husband, and I all act like siblings when we're together, which I know sounds weird with my husband, but like even my brother, they're a day apart in age.
Yeah.
And my brother's always like, he's the brother I never had. It's beautiful. I don't know how
Yeah.
else to describe it. It's not like your normal sibling relationship. And my brother and I have always been close, but then I think losing parents put a whole new layer onto that.
Yeah.
And my brother feels the same way I do. And when he left, I was like, there goes my whole family, even though I have a family I've created, but like my whole
Yeah.
childhood, it was to the point where I was like, maybe he shouldn't have come visit because it was actually easier
Oh,
before.
that's
And
so
then it was
sad.
just, yeah, it was just that spiral of like, when will I see him again? He lives all the way in California, like we're opposite ends. So my spiral looked like me being insanely busy.
Yeah.
I had zero time. So right before this, my grandma had come. My grandma came, left Tuesday. My brother came that same Tuesday and stayed for, I think, 8 days. But all of a sudden, I had this huge to do list. I had to wash everyone's sheets, everyone's blankets. I had to wash the pillow covers, the couch cushion covers. I had to make my winter to do list. Like my list was massive and I had zero time.
Your list is
And so
giving me
that's
anxiety just
right.
hearing about like washing parts of the couch. How does one do? Like,
Oh,
I
the couch
can't.
looks really good though. I will say
I
that.
bet it does, but like, oh my
Yeah.
God.
And for some reason, even though we were having no guests, I had to completely set the guest room back up and that bathroom. Why all of that had to be done and why I couldn't just be like, okay, the holidays are over. Let me relax, decompress. That's how I know I was kind of spiraling. And then I did pay for it a few days later. I got like a migraine and to the point to where I'm like, am I sick kind of thing, just wore myself out mentally. And so that's what my mini spirals look like. I don't get on social media. I don't respond to a lot of text messages. I don't post anything really. And so that's kind of what my spirals look like, a lot different than a lot of people's.
Yeah,
But
yours are mine's the opposite where I'm like, okay, I've been on social media for 6 hours. I'm gonna
yeah.
delete social. Now I'm on deleted social media, and I like kind of just like want to like hibernate because like, oh, the
So
world
you
is
like,
really hard.
okay. So you like shut down.
I like attribute it. I call it like nursing a wound, and so
Mm-hmm.
like I'll need to nap. Like, and it usually happens on a weekend for some reason. I think because like during the week I'm in survival mode and I'm by myself with the kids and we're homeschooling and we're like cranking out stuff and we're kind of like on our own. And then on the weekends my husband comes home and I think my brain then decides like it's okay to like fall apart a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll need like a 4-hour nap and then I like won't be hungry or I'll be starving. I had a spiral yesterday morning because he had been sick for 2 days and he'd been in bed for 2 days, and I was like, okay, so remember the neighbor's going to give us her play set and I need you to get back on that. And what are we doing with the inflatables that are still in the yard? That broken one needs to go. And he was like, bro, I'm like still in bed. I sit and like ruminate over inconsequential. Like, we can't go get the neighbor's place that it's frozen into the ground, ma'am. It's anchored into frozen ground under the ice storm. Like, stop it. And Josh was just like, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But
you do nap a lot when you spiral. And I think that's
when
actually
I spiral,
a good thing.
My body shuts down.
Yeah. Like, I don't sleep and then I pay for it later. And I think a lot of it has to do with like, if you've listened in the past, you know, I struggle with OCD. And so mine is like, everything has to be done right now and everything has to be perfect. And if not, then what will happen? My world will crush. And like, I just can't relax. I cannot relax. And I can't think of anything to relax. Like, I can't read because my brain is just going. I can't watch TV. It's too like sit down. I can't sleep. And I need to get a better grip on that, but I'm working on it.
Sit down. It's too sit downy.
Yeah. Like, if I sit down, I have to do something that requires like my hands to move and my brain to move. Like,
no, I have to
it's
fully
not
shut
the healthiest.
I think I did it on Monday. Yeah, I mean, whose is healthier? Like, I took a 4-hour nap on the couch while I like let my kids watch educational shows.
What was the educational show?
They usually watch Octodats, but then I think they switch it like halfway through because I'll wake up and be like, why are we watching Jurassic Park? The Camp Cretaceous doesn't sound educational. Those kids are such dicks to each other on that show, by the way.
They?
Like, I can't. Yes, I can't handle it. They're always like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, oh, ew.
I know. It's funny because my kids think that like idiot, stupid, hate.
Idiot's the worst. Idiot, stupid, and hate are the biggest swear words.
Yes, are cuss words, but then they don't flinch at the word like ass.
Not at all. Yeah.
Like, even the F word. Like,
he's allowed to say 5 bad words every time he gets a shot. And he has to say, if he's brave and does his best, he's always like, can I cry? And I'm like, yeah, you can cry, but you can't like scream and kick. Because like, you can have a regular emotion and be scared, but you can't like assault anyone.
Right.
And so if he's brave, he gets to say 5 swear words in the car on the way home. And it's always like, idiot, dummy, stupid. Yeah, because like swearing is allowed, but you're not allowed to say, and then it'll be like, hate ass. And I'm like, that's a good one.
I love it. I love it. That is so funny.
I hope people are listening with their kids in the car. Like, this will be a PG episode.
Psych.
Never. There's a disclaimer at the beginning. You heard it.
Yep.
And so then that's the other point that we wanted to get to, talking about mini spirals versus mega spirals. So my mini spiral recently just kind of just kept going and going and going. And I can usually tell when it switches over because I start to get really hyper focused on like, I get really hungry. And I get really like hyper focused. Yeah, I get super hungry and then I get like super tired all the time. And I don't know what it is, but like I can usually just be like, oh my God, I'm just like starving all the time. I think my body just goes into some like hyper survival mode. But I called, which shout out again, Psychology Today, now has a button where you can just click Psychiatrist, which is who you need to talk to get medication, just so everyone knows. I have friends ask me constantly. Like,
therapists can't prescribe.
Therapists and psychologists can't subscribe. Prescribe.
They can refer you.
Yes. What did I call it? That was the best. They can refer you, but like, don't waste your time because then you're just going to 2 people. But I mean, do waste your time with a therapist. I love wasting an hour every Sunday with my therapist. It's the best hour of my week.
A psychiatrist that prescribes isn't going to sit there and give you therapy.
They literally go through, and it's nice you can Zoom right now. And so she went through the like, there's the list, which anybody that hasn't been diagnosed with depression has taken the whatever that quiz is you take. When you have chronic depression like I have, they give you the list every time you go to the doctor and you have to like fill out the questionnaire.
My midwife gives it no matter what. Like,
really?
And it's not even
so
like
smart.
Yeah, I know they do give it right after you have a baby. And then now, like, my midwife just gives it to me every time.
She's like, girlfriend needs it every time.
Right. Even when I had my hip thing, they gave it to me, interesting enough. But it was through a hospital, so I don't know if that's why. But it was like the screening. They gave it to me for that too.
So if you haven't had the screening before, Oh god. I
think
honestly
people
I
are
went to the
struggling.
I went to the dermatologist yesterday because I've had this like weird recurring rash on my forehead, and she was like, "Oh, this is I forget the name of it, but it's fully like a stress related rash." And she's
Mm.
like, "We've seen a 80%, I think she said, uptick in this rash since the pandemic."
Oh, I believe it.
And I was like, "Mother of God." Like,
Yep.
no, like
Yeah.
now
So
I'm
you've probably
manifesting
seen
rashes.
this, and it's like, do you feel anxious? What is it like?
Mhm.
Do you have the questions?
The questionnaire that you will get starts with my favorite question is always the are you moving so slowly or speaking so slowly that people have noticed, or the opposite, being so fidgety and restless that you've been moving around a lot more than usual. That's a big
What?
one for me.
I
You
don't
don't
think
know that
that's
one?
been
That's
on
my
mine.
favorite question. Oh, that's my favorite question. That's always on mine. Feeling bad about yourself or that you are a failure, or have let your family down. Sad.
Yeah.
Poor appetite or overeating, feeling tired or having little energy, sleeping too much, little interest or pleasure in doing things. That's a big one for me. Normally, I like to be going 9 to 5. And when I start to
Yeah.
just like, I'd rather stay on the couch. And then thoughts that you would be better off dead or hurting yourself in some way, which I have
Oh,
never
shit. That
checked,
one's
but
like
like
yeah. I
legit,
feel like
it's
the
always
one
the
I've
last question
taken
that kicks me. Yeah.
yeah, the one I've taken is definitely more anxiety and depression. Like, do you feel anxious? Like, do you have too much
Yeah.
do you feel like you have too much energy?
That's what they will go through. So I just had the psychiatrist meeting, and they'll go through all of it with you. And then she
Mhm.
asked like more probing questions. She asked a couple interesting ones like, have you been online shopping in a way that's become detrimental to your family? Have you been like, and those could be
Interesting.
medication specific because I'm on Xanax and Prozac. And I mean, she asked me 100 questions. She didn't ask me any of those, but she asked me
Mhm.
100 questions because I've obviously already established as someone with depression. But, and then she was like, yeah, you're on the lowest dose of Prozac. And that's what I take for my PMDD, but it
Mhm.
also helps manage anxiety. And so she upped that. And then I re-meet with her on Wednesday. And then she wants to test me for ADHD because she thinks like that is part of it. Like my brain running so hard that I can't sleep at night and then needing to sleep during the day is a big
Okay.
indicator, I guess. So,
I mean, I feel like my spirals, the ones that I struggle the most with, to where they get to a full, what do we want to call it? A full blown depression.
we have acute depression, which we should mention. There's
Yeah.
like different, and then there's grief and bereavement depression, which is not really a depression. And so, like, if you're dealing with a loss, or I mean, the loss of the life you knew during the pandemic, that can be different.
Mhm.
Acute depression is kind of the real term for a mini spiral. Like
Mhm.
something small happened, I had a breakup, I'm feeling really sad for 2 weeks. And then there's
Mhm.
chronic depression, which is like the diagnosis of my life for 20
Yeah.
years. And you have to manage that and stay on top of it.
And like I didn't really struggle with depression until I got older. And the
Okay.
depression mostly that I've struggled with, minus grief depression, which I think is very normal with what we've
Yeah.
gone through, was always related to anxiety. Like it was my anxiety caused the depression because I could
Oh,
not get
they love hanging out together.
when I say my anxiety was bad, I mean it was to the point to where things got scary because I couldn't get my anxiety and panic attacks under control. And so that led me to depression, if that makes sense. The ones that I struggle the most with are the ones that don't have a link. So
Yeah.
if I know I'm spiraling because my brother just left, that's one thing. If I know I'm spiraling because maybe school is about to start and I'm overwhelmed because we homeschool and we're trying to fit in trips. And with us personally, it's our birthday season too. And there's like all these birthdays and all this stuff, like overwhelmed, kind of spiraling. But then I do have spirals every now and then that I don't really know why. And those are the
Yeah.
ones I struggle with the most. Because I
Yeah.
mean, how do you really resolve that? Like, I mean, I do meditation and I try and think, and I think a lot of those are just grief related. And sometimes grief doesn't look like your picture book sad
Mm-mm.
crying. Sometimes you don't even know why you have a deep grief day,
No
but
idea.
you do. Your body knows something. And it's weird. Janelle is really good at pointing out like your body knows anniversaries more than your brain does. And
Yeah.
so I was having one and she was like, is something coming up? And I can't remember what it was. maybe it was like the last time I saw my dad or something.
Yeah,
And
I
I was
think
like,
it was
no,
that.
nothing is coming up. Like, I don't know why I'm really struggling. And then, of course, like your phone pops up those memories. And it was like the last time I
Oh,
saw my dad, and it was like the only time
yeah.
he met Peyton. And it was a really difficult trip for multiple reasons. And which I would
I'm
love
gonna
to get
start
into at
crying
some
just
point.
listening to you talk about this because I had a dream about this the other night, like the
Yeah.
terrible like end of days in the hospital with my
Well, this
dad and
wasn't
like
even
how
like that. Like this, I didn't know this was going to be the last time. And
yeah,
so it was, my body knew, and it was weird.
yeah.
My brain didn't. And then I
That's
was
what
like,
they teach you
oh,
in grief. So I went to a bunch of grief like therapy groups, and they'd say your brain or your heart keeps a clock that your brain can't remember or something when it was like it goes with grief anniversaries, and so stuff like that like sneaks up on you. I wish if
hmm
we were smart, we would just write out a yearly calendar of like every when one happens for the next year, and then
right?
you can just like flip through it and know it's coming. But I
Yep.
don't know if that would help.
No. Well, and honestly, like when my spirals are bad, the OCD really kicks in when it's a sadness related one. Say I was really stressed over the holidays and I had a lot to do. I will take a mental health day and I will like lay around and read books and make my kids play outside the whole time while I just relax inside. And I feel like personally, like I'm good at those mental health days, like taking that time to decompress. And I need to be doing that more proactively rather than if I skip that day, I let myself get overwhelmed. And then that's when I start to spiral.
Yeah, I
So,
never take that day. I'm trying to think. I was Will, you were describing that. I was like, have I ever done like a day where I just like take the day? No, I've never done it. So that's probably why my body shuts down and is like, you go nap now on
yes,
couch, and I'm dead.
exactly. You don't get to choose now. Like,
I've
I will make
never
you.
yeah, my kids are just not they're boy, and so they can only be left alone for like 40 minutes at a time before somebody starts choke holding someone.
Yep.
And so like I literally cannot just be
No.
like, "Good day, sirs."
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
it will turn into a death sentence. And
Yep.
so well I should be better at taking the day off.
I know. It's hard to do. I feel guilty every time, and I'm like, no, this is what I
I
need to
do
do.
like send on weekends when Josh is home. I'll be like, "You guys need to go somewhere for like half the day." But then
Oh,
I
that's
just like
perfect.
I clean the whole day, and I
Yeah.
need to be better about like sitting on the couch. And like my dream, which is so pathetic, is like I've been like, you know what I'd love to do? Have the time to get back into one of the housewife franchises.
Like the whole
Wouldn't that
thing.
be like just watch a whole season? Like, wouldn't that
Yep.
remember how fun that used to be to just like binge? Or like my
Yes.
girlfriend the other night was like talking about The Bachelor, and I was like, oh, that'd be so fun to just like get super into like an ongoing show
Mhm.
again. But like, there's no fucking way. There's no
No.
fucking way
I
right
used to
now.
do that with like my roommates, and it was
I
wonderful.
know. Oh my god,
But now I
CSI
can't
marathons in
keep up with it.
college, the
Yes.
best.
Yep. So how do you know the difference, I guess, is the big thing, especially for spirals that last a few days? It's a hard one. I let it play out for a few days, and I kind of also see how I feel. If I feel that depression start to creep in, that's when I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, this is a little more than before. If I feel the
Yeah.
OCD start to creep in, sit back and I have to make myself do things. And so when I do feel like I need to keep my mind busy, I talk to my husband, and I usually try and make a list of like things going on, like what do I think I need to get done, and then like have him help me sort through like what really needs to get done. And then
Ooh, smart.
I use workout, and I know like we talked about numbing your emotions on another one, but it's just that anxious energy that I have to get out.
Mhm.
And so I make sure I work out. I do some kind of like yoga release, and you can just Google yoga to release anxiety, yoga for depression, yoga to release emotions, like anything that you're feeling, just Google with the word yoga. And there's so many people out in the
Jenna sent
community
me
that
a
want to
grief
help.
one once, and I was just like
Yes.
hysterically sobbing for the
Yep.
whole 10 minutes. I was like, how
Well,
do
I
they
think that
do
one was
this? It's
meditation.
witchcraft. I
Was
don't
that
know,
one
but
meditate? Yeah.
it was intense. Yeah, it was
I
meditation.
meditating when you're spiraling is really hard, but I encourage
So
it.
hard. Yeah.
Or I make myself like yesterday I was feeling that kind of like that OCD start to creep in. All of a sudden all the paint needed to be touched up in my house, and I found myself touching up the black doors all over our house. Like why that had to be done, I don't know. And so I made myself go outside. And I was like, I'm going to ride my bike with my kids. And I did, and I felt so much better afterwards, just getting that vitamin D and just being outside and get outside and get in touch with nature.
Well, and it's hard, like, and that's where I live right now. Like, we've been sequestered in the
Mhm.
house for 3 or 4 days. Like, nobody's getting any vitamin D. It's
Nope.
tough. And so I also factor that in. And that's a bit, one of these articles actually, that I'll link both of them, but from the American Psychiatric Association talks a lot about seasonal affective disorder and
Mhm.
also known as SAD, which I just love so much.
I
But
know.
you can get it in the summer too. It's more
Mhm.
prevalent in women. You can also get it in the summer, even though it's usually related to vitamin D. And I think that that's worth a read, especially in these winter months. I won't go into it too much on here because if you know about SAD, you already know about it. But there were a few revelations in the article that I didn't know about seasonal affective disorder. And so I'm in the process of buying one of the a vitamin D light for our
Mhm.
house. The last one I bought was so bright no one could look at it. And then Mikey was just like staring at it. And I was like, you're gonna be blind. So
Yep.
we're gonna get a different one that has like settings. So get one on Amazon. I'll see if I can find a good one and link it on the show notes. But seasonal affective disorder is a real thing too. And so you have to factor that
Mhm.
in this time of year. Like, we're not getting outside like we normally, my kids are usually outside for 6 hours in the summer
Mhm.
sometime. They'll
Yeah.
want to sit on the porch and eat. And
Yeah.
now we're inside 24 hours a day for 4 days
Yes.
in a row. Like, it's
Could you,
hard.
like, take a huge duvet and just, like, bundle up and just, like, put your face up to the sun for, like, 10
I
minutes?
yeah, and that's something that we need to get back. I sold all my winter stuff when we lived in
Oh.
Richmond. So I just got my pair of snow pants on Friday.
Yay.
So then we got the ice storm on Friday. So we barely
Yeah.
been outside. But now I have snow pants. Now I have like appropriate gear to be outside. I have a
Yeah.
knee length parka, like I'm ready to
Okay.
go. But before that,
Well,
we would go sledding at the neighbor's house and
yeah.
which was amazing, but I was so cold and Mikey would get so cold that he'd be like deuces
Mhm.
after
Yeah.
20 minutes.
I mean, it doesn't help if you have screaming kids that are miserable because it's cold. Like, that's not gonna
No,
do you any
and
good.
Zach could stay outside cold all day, but Mikey's like, no, thank
Yeah.
you. I'll be go. Mikey's straight up. My neighbors still were like laughing about it. He straight up left the snow hill party and just walked home. And I all of a sudden looked up and he was almost like around the corner. And I was like, gotta go, everyone. Mike left the party. Like,
Yep. And you can get your vitamin D levels checked. I have had mine checked multiple times, and surprisingly, I was low. I don't know
oh,
how, and it was in the summer. And my
mhm.
husband was like, "How are you low? You are outside more than you are inside." And I was like, "I don't know.
Yeah,
My body just like wasn't absorbing it for some reason." So I take, and I'm not a doctor, full disclaimer. I think it's fine to just take vitamin D anyways. I
yeah.
do like these little drops, and it's like one little drop, it's like an orange flavored thing on the tongue every day. I forget some days. Super easy, but you can have your levels checked. And also, you mentioned it's in the summer, people are also getting it. I think there's this huge like thought that all the sunscreen we're applying and sun protection, because we've learned so much about the sun, is actually harming us because we're wearing long sleeves with SPF, or might be wearing like a hat. We're covering up so our body actually can't absorb the vitamin D. And so in the summer, I am very sun conscious because it's a weird balance. It's like you want
Yeah.
your vitamin D, but you also want to protect your skin,
You
especially
don't
because
want
like
to get skin
yeah,
cancer. Yes.
right. Like my mom had like the basal cell thing she had to have removed, and so I'm always like cautious. It's a hard balance. And so in the mornings, I don't wear anything. I wear like a light SPF on my face, but I make sure my arms are out, my legs are out in the mornings, and I'll go on like a walk or go garden and absorb the sun. And then when the sun is the strongest, I make sure I cover up.
Okay.
And same with my kids. I never put sunscreen on their legs. My kids don't really burn. I know you don't have that option.
Uh-huh. My kids have to wear beekeeper suits to the beach because they're so
Yes.
pale. I don't burn, but my kids and my husband roast like little
Yes.
shrimp.
But if you burn, like make sure you get like some morning sun or something so that you don't want to burn, but make sure you get something so that you do absorb that vitamin D.
Yeah.
And there's a lot if you look at like any kind of like earthy natural blogs, there's a big thing about it. Like they're not saying like don't use sunscreen, but make sure you're also getting some vitamin D
Some sun, some straight up sun, some unadulterated sun time.
Yep. And
That's
same within the
interesting. I didn't know
winter,
that.
because like in the winter, like I always put on like an SPF on my face, and then I cover up my whole body because I'm cold.
Yeah.
So I try and go out a few minutes without like SPF on my face, and then absorb it, and then go put it all on. So my wrinkles don't get too bad as I age.
Don't worry, we got you.
So if you've never been to a psychiatrist, is that the right one?
Yes, the doctor, the medicine one.
Yep, medicine
The
doctor.
medicine lady.
We kind of want to talk about like what that would look like, because that can be scary. When I'm off my medication in the past and I've had to get back on it, like I'm like, this isn't going anywhere, I'm always hesitant to call, and I don't know why. My husband
It's fun
usually
to
calls
just like
for
keep
me.
putting it off, putting it off, putting it off.
And I don't know if it's like a shame thing or I don't know what it is. I do want to say that sometimes getting into a medicine doctor is a long ass wait. And even if you're like, this is an emergency, they're like, well, we can see you in 4 days. And if you are in a deep depression, that 4 days is awful. So you can call your primary care physician. You can do telehealth.
Yeah.
You can see your OBGYN, your midwife. There's a ton of other options.
Yeah, there's resources that you don't think of when you're in the bottom of the hole. And I never think of it when I'm in the bottom. It's like Jen and I always joke that we forget that Advil exists when we have a headache.
Right.
Like I forget that there's other avenues to get help when I'm in a mental health crisis.
Yeah. For some reason, I always thought I had to get it from a psychiatrist.
Yes.
And then
I think that was just the stigma of like the 80s
that
stuck with us.
I started medicine for anxiety when I was a little younger. And so, of course, I was with my parents. And I think, one, there wasn't a lot. Like, we kept going to doctors and they kept saying, oh, it's growing pains. Oh, it's natural. Oh, it's hormonal. All of that stuff. So I always thought that's how you had to do it, because I had to go to a therapist who then had to refer me to a psychiatrist who then had to do a full evaluation. And that wait was months. And and so I always thought that's how you had to do it. And then you have to also like check back in, which is a good thing, especially if you've never been on medication. And then when I was pregnant with Peyton, I had a really bad depression, and my mom had just passed away and all this stuff. And Brandon was like, just call your midwife. And I was like, no. They're like, no. I don't want them to worry. I don't want them, da-da-da. And he was like,
why do we
they
think
can get
about
you
stuff
in
like
sooner.
that?
Yeah, I had called my therapist and I was like, is there any like emergency referral? And she was like, no, everyone's like booked out. And of course it was like middle of winter. Everyone had like a multiple week long wait. And so finally I was like, I called the midwife and I was like, I need to be seen. And they were like, come in tomorrow. And even that wait seemed a long time. I was like, can you not get me in today? And she prescribed me medicine right there on the spot. And I started it that day. And then she like called, and another midwife I usually see emailed and like followed up and kind of kept on top of it. But I don't know why I've never thought to just go to the normal doctor, because they can
my
prescribe it too.
OBGYN and when I lived in Richmond was the single greatest doctor I have ever had. And he did all my medication management. And I would just like sit in his office, and the first time he saw me, he didn't even like look at any part of my body. I was just in there. My dad had died like 6 months earlier, and I was sobbing. My kids were in the office with me, and I was like, I'm a mess. Nothing's working. And it was like an hour of me just crying in his office, and then he wrote it up, and then he like continually monitored it. He was my full-time medication management for the 2 years I lived in Richmond. Like,
really?
OBGYNs can be amazing. And because of telehealth now, we can like when I noticed that my mini spiral was turning into like an elongated spiral, when I went on Psychology Today, I think I got a doctor's appointment within 48 hours with the psychiatrist. Awesome. I know. So like 2022 does have its benefits. I mean, like telehealth is making doctors way more readily available for things like this, because they're just working from their home and they can just churn through without the overhead. And so there's more doctors available for,
Have you ever gone to like an actual, what is the psychiatrist?
Psychiatrist in an office, like in face-to-face? No, I've never. Nope, I've always been primary care or like I also find that physician's assistants are rad at medication management. So if you can't get in with your regular doc, like GP, physician's assistants are often, like, not to stereotype, but they're often like younger, and they're a lot of times women, and so they're more up to date on the newer medications and the newer ways to manage. And so I had a physician's assistant in Richmond that was amazing once, but I've never been into an actual like psychiatrist office.
I want to touch on it a little bit because I went to one, and I don't know if it was just this office or what, but I was a little surprised. It necessarily wasn't a bad thing.
Okay.
But I just want to like talk about like that experience a little bit because it was different than what I had experienced before. So when I had to get medication when I was younger with my parents, I went to a private psychiatrist. So it's not covered by insurance. This is back, I don't even know what year it was, maybe early 2000s.
Yeah.
And my therapist recommended this, and she was wonderful, but it was pricey. So I'm going to put that out there. Then when I went on my own, I just called for a psychiatrist, and I looked one up based on reviews, and she was great. If anyone ever needs to go to one, I would recommend her in the area. But it was completely different. So I walked in, I had to sign in, give my driver's license. They asked if I was on anything, and I was like, what do you mean? Like, basically, like, are you on drugs kind of thing? And I was like, no. And then I had to fill out all these questions, and it was more than I've ever had to fill out before. And some of them were good because at this point I was like, oh, I have anxiety. And that's when I got diagnosed with like, okay, you also have depression. And I was like, I cried, and I was like, I've never been diagnosed. I don't have depression. And she was like,
I know.
You do.
Depression has such a stigma, and it still does. Even when I tell people I have depression, I'm like, oh, the word depression needs to be revamped for
Well, you think about a certain type of person, and that's not how it is. So
and that's not how you see yourself, even though you like we are.
Yeah.
I'm a couch person sometimes. It's fine.
Yeah. And so I filled out this long questionnaire. I will say, not to be judgy, but the clientele in the office was different than what I had experienced. There was definitely people withdrawing. There were people definitely, I don't want to say they were on anything. They might have not been anything. There was definitely a lot of mental disorders in the room, myself included.
Mental crisis center. Yeah.
Yes. I was a little uncomfortable. They had like separate rooms. There was this one guy acting very irrational, and they put him in another room with like its own little area. It wasn't like open seating. So it was like you walked in the door, the receptionist is behind like glass. And this was like pre-COVID. It's not like a sneeze guard.
So not COVID glass.
Yeah. They put me in like a room. It was like a waiting room basically, but it had like glass walls. It wasn't open, if that makes sense.
Oh my gosh.
And then there was another one like that. And it wasn't like it was like a cold environment, and like I just didn't prepare for that because I had never been in that situation. Then they took me to the back, and they were so nice. Beyond nice. They were wonderful. This is their job though. And they weighed me, they did my blood pressure, and then they're like, okay. And they handed me a cup, and I had to do a drug test. And I didn't expect that because I was like, I'm here for anxiety, but they had to do a drug test. I can't remember exactly. I think they had to do a pregnancy test as well before they prescribe. And then I met with the doctor, and she was wonderful. And she was like, I completely understand. I lost my mom. It was right before I lost my mom, and I wasn't pregnant yet. I just remember crying, and I was like, and you're okay? And you're alive? And she was like, yeah. She was like, sometimes I have these times where I'm not okay, and I just cry for no reason or something triggers it, but you will survive this. And I just remember crying. And then what I thought was interesting, and I'm not positive this was a setup, but my husband and I are convinced it is. She goes through the whole thing, and I'm sitting there, and she's at her desk, and she has like her little script pad so like she can prescribe, and she's filling it out on the computer. And so she fills everything out, and she's like, okay, I'm going to put you on this medication. Here's our plan. And so she's still logged into her computer, and she was like, oh, I've had a lot of sweet tea. I've got to go to the restroom. And she gets up and leaves for a few minutes. And our appointment was like 30 seconds from being over. And I'm pretty sure it was a ploy to see if I was drug seeking, to see if I would like take her script pad. Because she like wrote it, and then she put it like on the edge of her desk. and she left. And they have cameras everywhere, obviously.
Whoa,
And
you're
then
in
she
a
came
sting
back.
operation.
I think for first patients, they do something like that, honestly. And then she comes back and she's like, okay, great. And then hands me the script pad and I walked out. So I'm like, that bathroom break could have waited that extra 20, 30 minutes, or not minutes,
Oh,
seconds.
oh my
And
God.
then when I had to do my follow-ups, I still had to fill out all those questionnaires. I did not have to do a drug test anymore. I didn't have to do a pregnancy test. It was just like a follow-up, and she didn't leave the room anymore. And it was just like, how is this medication making you feel? Going over the symptoms, let's either adjust or stay. And then as we got on what we thought was like a good dose, then the appointments got spaced out a lot more.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just wanted to like give that
That's the best story I've heard in a long time, so thank you
because
for that. I don't even care if
I
this
didn't
is an
expect it.
episode about that. I've
Yeah.
never heard that story. It was so good.
And there was, like I said, there was definitely people
Yeah.
with different disorders, and I just
Yeah.
didn't expect it. And I didn't expect to do a drug test. So
You were at a crisis center probably, and people there are in mental health crisis as well as you
Yep.
were. I have been fortunate to not really have to, but like I would take that in a second when it gets,
Oh, yeah.
you'll know when it gets bad enough, you'll know
Mhm.
that you would take that in a second
Oh, yeah.
because you just are in a place where you need relief.
Yeah.
You
And
don't
they
care
treated
if,
everyone with so much respect that I thought it was wonderful. And like, I think I cried a few times, probably during the drug test and everything. And the nurse that I had was wonderful. And she was like, oh, honey, I've been there, just really reassuring. And she's like, we're going to get you sorted out and we've got you. And I was just like, okay. After that, we just chatted. I had the same nurse every time, which I liked too. And then we just chatted each time because I was a little more cheerful. And they were just so respectful, which I think is wonderful because I don't know, you think about those environments and you think cold and hostile and they're treating
yeah.
people like they're doing something
You
wrong.
think like Girl Interrupted, and it's not
Yes.
that. Like it's
No.
gonna be, you're gonna be treated like a person, hopefully. And if you're
Mhm.
not, like, and I
That's not your
think that's
place then.
another point that you have to understand. And so so Jenna's story is about psychiatrists. My like
Mhm.
therapist's office can be places that you feel comfortable or uncomfortable too. I've had to leave therapists just because their offices made me feel so uncomfortable
Yes.
in terms of
Me
like,
too.
I don't like going into your office and it's like a dark, weird cubicle where you have like a bunch of water fountains going and
Mm.
like weird hymn music. Like
Oh, see, I love that
I
shit.
see, and that's the thing. And I knew
Yeah.
you would too. I knew you
Yeah.
fucking would. And so this is a good point. People find your fit in the office.
Yes.
And so my primary therapist now is an art therapist. And it's basically because, like, first of all, she's rad. But second of all, like, her room, I sit in a giant velvet chair and she sits in like a
Ooh.
cute little, like, and I rarely do art because I'm terrible at it. But like, that's the kind of therapy I need, is the therapy that's like very reflective
Mhm.
and like, if I'm fidgety and she knows I need to do something with my hands, I have that option. I can't just sit
Mm.
on a couch next to a box of Kleenex with a water fountain and
Right.
have someone speak. And the woman I'm referring to that I saw in Richmond at one point was, okay, honey, well, just so you know, let's
Mm.
practice, because this is when my dad was really sick, and she made me go through a full practice of, if my dad dies, how I wouldn't
Mhm.
die. Do you remember when you thought that when your
Oh,
parent died, you would die? And so
1,000%.
I literally said to her one day, like, well, if my dad dies, I'm going to die.
Mhm.
And she was like, okay, well, that, and I mean, it was the most like traumatic therapy session I've ever had, but I think I needed to do it. And I
Mhm.
found the notes recently from it. And because I used to write down my therapy after therapy every time. And it was just like, okay, so here's how you will not die if your dad dies. And my dad wasn't even
Wow.
supposed to die at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful I had that, but like I couldn't do the like sit in the room with the water fountain while she
Mhm.
talked to me like this. Like I need somebody that's going to be like, that sounds like bullshit. And so find your person. Like
Yeah.
Jenna probably wouldn't respond well to someone that was like, that sounds like fucking bullshit. Like
Mhm.
I need somebody that's a little bit more tough, and like my therapist would never say, she might say bullshit, but like she's
Yeah.
a classy gal. But I need somebody that's like a little bit more tough, and I can't do like the sweet serenity thing. And
And
so
that's what I need. Yeah.
no, exactly. And so that
Yeah.
know that you're not married to your therapist. You can find
Right.
15 different therapists, and you might need a different therapist before you have a baby and a different therapist after you have a baby, and a therapist before someone dies and a therapist after someone dies, and a therapist before a breakup and a different therapist after a breakup. So you're not married to your psychiatrist, you're not married to your therapist, and you're not married to your mini spiral or mega spiral. And so that's what the other point I was going to make. I know when my mini spirals go to mega spirals because I call it like the hibernating bear, where all I want to do is sleep and eat. I just want to sleep and eat. And those are very common depression symptoms. All that sounds good. The only thing that brings my heart excitement is the idea of sleeping and the idea of eating. And so I know at that point that I have left like, ooh, we're having a stress response to, ooh, our brain chemistry is off and we need to tweak our medication. And so I think that figuring out what your distinction is so unique to every person, and probably something you should do with your doctor or your therapist, but it looks different for everyone. Jenna becomes high functioning, I become low functioning. And when mine lasts like 3 weeks, then I know that it's time to call someone.
See, and if mine is like more than a couple days, mine will go hyper, and then it'll go into a deep depression to where I don't want to say can't get out of bed, but I basically am just like in bed. And if I'm out with my family, I'm just crying the whole time, like very typical depression. But I know if I let my hyper spiral keep going, that's what it'll get to.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm
See,
like
I don't even catch myself that fast. You're fast. It takes me 3 weeks to catch it. Jenna's a OG in the game.
I've had 2 really deep depressions, and my goal is to never get to that point again. Or if I do, to get out of it quicker, because that shit was scary and it was awful.
And I've never had a panic attack. What does a panic attack feel like?
Oh, shit.
I've heard people say it feels like you're dying. Does it literally feel like you're dying?
Oh, 1,000%.
Does it feel like your heart's stopping, or you can't, like, what feels like it's dying?
It varies, honestly. They're not all the same. And as I've gotten older, they've changed. When I was younger, it was just like nonstop ruminating thoughts, no appetite. Like you feel like you actually like are sick. You cannot eat. I would get super bloated. I would get fevers, and I would get like tunnel vision. I just felt like I was in like a tunnel all the time, and people were talking at me, but I couldn't process it. My teeth felt like weird, chattery. And I had panic attacks that would last days. And I would feel like this. No sleep. I could not sleep. I just remember I remember this one trip in Mexico, and I just remember laying next to my parents, and I was so annoyed that they were asleep, and I just wanted to wake them up. And then I would struggle more at night because everything shut down. And then as I've gotten older, I've had like the panic attacks that are more like when I was younger, I couldn't always pinpoint what they were besides like travel. As I've gotten older, I've had like the panic attacks with sickness. And so that's very in the moment, and they don't last necessarily days. I might have multiple in a day. And it's like the racing heart. Oh, I get sweaty hands with both of them. I get chills. I don't get like hot. I get chills, ruminating thoughts every time. And then I get, when I was younger and now, like upset stomach. Now that I'm older, I just feel like I want to run and just leave. And like nothing matters. And I just want to like run out and leave. And it's, so they're really fun.
No, thank you. I'll RSVP no to that. Thank you.
Yep. I mean, I went to the hospital 2 or 3 times growing up and got diagnosed with like, oh, you probably have some kind of virus, or it's hormones from your period. And it was panic attacks.
Oh my God. Isn't the fucking 90s and 2000s were whack, man?
Fuck, man. Yeah. And then as a little kid, I used to get panic attacks, and it was racing heart, couldn't sleep. And I had this like vision of something large. It's a really weird thing to describe. I can't even really describe it. This like large vision, and just like this feeling of like floating when I was little. And then I would get stomach aches always like the day after, and they said it was growing pains.
I think this is a helpful thing for you to tell us though too, because then we can look for that. Like all of us can look for that in our own kids. Like you describing what it was like as a kid helps parents see, oh my God, maybe my kid is struggling, because kids are impossible to tell if they're struggling with anxiety because they're just like so all over the board all the time.
And my panic attacks, even as a kid, have always been a lot I get a lot more at night. And so I would just remember like being like, I can't sleep. And I just have this big feeling. And like, I couldn't describe it. And I just have this weird feeling. My parents were just like, okay, like
Okay, weird
come watch
kid.
ER with us. Like,
oh,
yeah.
yes.
Or
Yes,
I Love Lucy. And yeah, I just remember like sitting up with my parents and yeah, but I didn't know, they didn't know what it was. So they were just like,
Nobody
oh, it's
knew
your growing
then.
pains.
People barely knew then. Yeah, my
Yeah.
mom was being treated for mental illness around that same time, and like they didn't know
Mhm.
anything about anything. It was wild
No.
the stuff that they were
Yeah.
doing.
And based on my growing pains, I mean, I should be like 10 feet tall, and I'm
At
not. So
least. You're still having growing pains occasionally, right?
apparently, yeah.
You're
So
still growing, sweetie pie.
I know. Oh, just not up. No, I'm just kidding.
Nobody
Oh.
is. Okay. Well, so mostly what we wanted to like strike a chord with in this episode, I think, is that mini spirals happen to all of us. And
Mhm.
the quicker you can recognize that it's happening and do some sort of self care. And I hate the phrase self care because, like, I feel like it's like, I'm going to put cucumbers on my eyes and take a bath. Like,
No, it
self
could
care
be
is.
call your therapist, go for a walk, spend
Mhm.
some time by yourself, spend
Yeah.
some time with friends. It could be anything.
Honestly, my favorite self care, and everyone who's listened knows this, is putting on a murder podcast and
Mhm.
mopping the whole house. It's my steam mopping the whole house is my favorite to just like cleanse my whole brain and working out obviously, but or just driving around when I
Uh-huh.
was having a lot of trouble in Richmond for a while. I would drive around and listen to the whole like Doors best of because the Doors is my
Mhm.
dad's favorite band, and that is like some like people think that like emo and scream music was invented in like the 2000s. Like
No.
the Doors originated it, and I would drive around and listen to it, the volume all the way up with the windows down in my husband's truck because it had the craziest sound system, and scream the Doors as loud as I could. I drive down this road. It's basically the road that like if you take the long way from my old house up to Powhatan.
Yeah.
And I would just in the dark scream the Doors, and that was like so cleansing to
Oh,
me.
I love that.
But you have to find what your weird self-care is, and it's not going to
Mhm.
be a spa trip for most of us.
And it might be
A spa-
different every time. I had a
yeah.
therapist tell me when you're in a good mental space, not when you're in a spiral,
Ugh.
to write down, put your name in the middle of a circle, and
Okay.
then make a bubble and write down everyone who can support you and that you're comfortable talking to, and then make a bigger bubble outside of that and write down things you can do to help you mentally. And that could be call Janelle, call
Yeah.
your husband, call your therapist, because like therapists should be in that circle of people you
Yeah,
can talk to.
absolutely.
Or it could be write a letter and like write down all of these things, because
That's
when
so
you're
smart.
in those mental spirals,
You can't do it.
everything else, you have like that tunnel vision and everything else doesn't matter. And so if you can pull that list out and be like, oh shit, I need to call Janelle, or oh shit, I need to go for a drive. Like you can't think because you can't prioritize. Like if you're
Mhm.
like me and you have to do everything, it's like, oh, I can't call Janelle because I need to go reorganize the pantry. Well,
Yeah.
no, you need to call Janelle. And then if that still is, maybe you could organize a little, or
And
call
writing it
Janelle
down
while
like
you
yeah.
organize. Like,
And if you find like I found that Doors driving at night thing on accident when I was having a full spiral one night and I was determined that I was just going to like leave my family. And
mm-hmm.
so I was just so mad at the kids were in bed, but I was just like so filled with rage at the world that I was like I need to go. And Josh was like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "See you later."
I don't
But then
know.
I realized like oh my God, that was so therapeutic. And I like came home and I was like, I'm sorry, like this, and this was bothering me. It's not about
Yes.
you. I shouldn't have put it on you. And then I was like, oh shit, that did exactly what it was supposed to do. So now I
Mm-hmm.
can say, like, I need to go for a night drive and I need to crank whatever music it is. And
I
then
love
it
that.
leads me to and so write that, like Jenna said, write that stuff down so that you have it in the
Yes.
future, because sometimes my brain won't jump to like, why don't you go for a night drive? Or
Right.
why don't you da 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 da?
And
I
make
just
yourself do one. Like that's the other
do
thing. Like
one.
just make
Yes.
yourself do it. Yeah.
Oh, it's so hard sometimes. As we've stated a million times before, we are not doctors. Our goal here is to talk about things that your friends don't want to talk about, that you don't want to talk about at your PTA meeting, and to let you know you're not alone, and to leave the trail of breadcrumbs for when you should call your therapist.
And honestly, also, I think personally to like notice these things in your friends to reach out and help.
Oh, smart.
Because sometimes I don't, yes, and your kids, your spouse, because sometimes I don't want to talk, but then, or even if somebody's like, how are you? My first response always is good or fine or whatever. But if somebody notices this and is like, hey, something's going on, let's talk. Yeah. So do that for your friend also. If you
How are you really doing?
Yeah.
So. I knew Jenna was having a spiral on her most recent spiral because we were like, okay, once Jenna's brother leaves, we're going to start recording again. And then Jenna kind of went MIA for 3 days. And then I was like, let's record. And she was like, okay. And then she kind of went MIA for 3 days again. And I was like, oh, she's doing like a spiral to spiral. Like this is.
No, like, it wasn't a spiral to spiral. Remember, it was a spiral to snow days. And you were like, I was making sure you weren't spiraling. And I was like, no, it snowed and we're outside.
Spiral to snow days. Yeah, you guys got snow and played outside for 3 days. And I was like, okay, fine. We're only single spiraling. Yeah. Totally fine.
If it was a double spiral, I hope you would be on a plane knocking on my door.
I'd be, I would. Josh said that to me the other day when I was in my spiral. He was like, do you need me to put you on a plane to Virginia? And I was like, everyone has the flu. I don't want to go bring the flu to people. Like, here's my flu gift basket because we just keep passing the flu around in my house. Okay, so we hope that this was helpful. We hope that we overshared. And we hope that you can use this as a tool to help yourself, help your friends.
Perfect. And with that, call your therapist.
And take your meds.
2, 3, 4